right, we're ready now for part 3 of our journey into genres. Say that 3 times fast. So we're going to look at keyboard genres. So we're talking about piano, harpsichord, organ. Yes, those are all instruments, but they don't play the same genres that an ensemble like a symphony or band is going to perform. So they have some things that are sort of unique to their own little world. One of those is called a chorale prelude. Remember when we talked about the vocal genres, we mentioned the chorale as being a vocal hymn that you would sing in the Lutheran church. Well, if you were a composer in the Lutheran church, and you were likely also the organist for the church. So before the service started, you would play a prelude, which is any kind of piece that comes before something else. Yeah, pre, we know our Latin roots there. Pre means before. So you as the organist might just improvise on whatever the basic hymn of the day is, sort of a hymn that ties all the service together. So you would play this chorale prelude. You've taken a chorale, you're making a prelude out of it. It's generally sort of improvisational sounding because that's what they were originally, but then many composers also wrote them down. So we have lots of those. Bach in particular wrote lots of chorale preludes because he was a church musician. That was his job. And every Sunday, new chorale prelude. So usually it's for organ. You might play it on piano. It would be harder because obviously the organ's got that extra set of keys down there to play with your feet. So there's more lines than you can play with your hands. So generally that's an organ type of genre. Another piece from the same period of time is called a prelude and fugue. Prelude, again, is the introduction to that. So it tends to be sort of improvisational sounding. Maybe impress you with the technical skill of the performer. And then after the prelude, it would go into a fugue, which is a very specific type of piece, which we'll talk about more in detail later. But basically, if you think about a round, like row, row, row your boat, you have the same melody that keeps coming in, but it sort of staggers as you do the round and keeps kind of rolling over and over itself. And that's what happens in a fugue. You have a theme that keeps sort of popping up through different things. Again, that's a piece that we hear a lot on organ because you've got 2 keyboards, 2 hands, 2 feet, and another keyboard. So you can get basically 3 lines of music happening. So it'd be like having row, row, row your boat, row, row, row your boat, row your boat with feet, hands doing that. So it's kind of an interesting thing. It's sometimes difficult to get your ears wrapped around because it's very busy. The melody is not like sing, here's the melody. The melody just keeps moving from here to there, and it can be kind of disconcerting, but if you start focusing on where that melody is going, it'll give you something to pay attention to. But again, that's mostly done on organ, but we also hear that on other keyboard instruments. So once we get into the 18th century and the 19th century, that's when we start hearing piano music. Piano didn't even exist until that period of time. So we don't have piano genres until the time of Mozart and Haydn and moving forward. The 19th century is really sort of the golden age of piano, where composers who just loved it. It was bigger, it could play louder, it could be a solo instrument in a big space because of some technical innovations of the time. So we hear lots of new things happening with keyboard music during that period of time. One of the things that composers like to do was to write pieces for piano that would sound like you might be able to sing them. They were very much interested in having music be singable in the 19th century. And that we sort of see that in the 20th century because if you look at a lot of early movies, they would take instrumental music from the 19th century, put words to it, and make a theme song for a movie. So those 19th century composers succeeded. They wrote music for instruments that was very singable. So they would write these piano pieces that would sound like, well, maybe that was originally written for a singer in piano, and they just threw the singer out, and now we're just doing it with piano. That's the effect that they were kind of going for. And we call those songs without words. So it's really clear. It's supposed to sound like somebody was singing, but there are no words, so it's a song without words. And that's a genre all by itself. Then we have a lot of other kinds of genres that are mostly applied to fairly short piano pieces. We have piano concertos, so you'll hear that with the orchestra and a big piano thing. But we have lots of fairly intimate kinds of little piano pieces from the 19th century in particular. Lots of times those will use names of dances that were popular at the time. The waltz comes into being in the 19th century, the dance that everybody has to learn for ballroom dancing class. That comes from the 19th century. So you'll hear a lot of waltzes for piano. They're not intended for you to dance to, though. These are not music that somebody would sit down and play so all your friends could get up and waltz around the room. It's more of a concert waltz. So it's going to retain the character of a waltz. It's going to be in triple meter. It's going to have that sort of lilting feel that a waltz has, but they never intended for you to dance to it. It's really intended to be listened to. The minuet is another dance that composers often take, although it's mostly in the 18th century that we see that, because it kind of goes out of fashion after that. Again, it's a triple meter dance, a little more stately than a waltz. So if you think about people with huge dresses and wigs and moving very gracefully, that's a minuet. So you'll see instrumental keyboard pieces called minuets. It also appears in some other places, but we'll talk about that later. There's also a big interest in what we would sort of call world music now, but at the time they didn't talk about it that way. But composers were very interested in using types of movements that were reflective of their own cultures. Once we get to the 19th century, we sort of get out of the I'm German, I'm Italian, I'm whatever, and people were moving around a lot more. They were exposed to lots more kinds of music, much the same way that we have now. I mean, we can hear music from all over the world because of the internet. They didn't have the internet, but they could hear music as they traveled around. But they also wanted to promote the music of their own cultures, particularly if they were from a country that was not Germany, Italy, France, the big sort of musical countries of the early time. So say I'm a composer like Chopin who comes from Poland. Poland has some lovely dance forms, the polonaise, the mazurka, the polka, that I can take as a composer, write some beautiful piano music that's based on these forms that I've known my whole life because this is what people dance to in my country. Take those, make piano works out of them. So you'll see a lot of those kinds of terms that relate to something particular to a country or that are descriptive of something. Another word that's similar to that or used in a similar sort of way is a nocturne, which means a night piece. So it's a piece that's supposed to sound like it happened at night, so it's usually more serene, calming kind of piece. That's something we see a lot with piano music. Again, the piano came in kind of late to the show, so it's coming in at a time when people are very much interested in describing things with music. So the nocturne sort of describes the night. We see pieces with titles like Butterflies or By the Sea, where the composer's trying to create that sense in the piece. Those are obviously not genres. We sort of group all those together and call them lyric piano pieces. So all those little short pieces, sometimes trying to depict something, sometimes just trying to depict a mood. We put them in the big grouping of a lyric piano piece, and then you can sort of throw everything into that little pile that doesn't fit into one of the other ones that we just talked about.